Hello and welcome to Better Part. I'm your host, Bobby Chastain. Today we have a guest that's going to talk to us about sound and music. So he's mic'd music, he's made music, and he's a teacher of sound design here at KMVT. So stay tuned. Our guest today is Tim Erskine. Tim is works here at KMVT. He has a show called My Tune Television, and he's been working with bands and sound engineers for quite some time. Tim, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bobby. It's nice to be here.
So this is sort of your specialty. You're kind of a jack of all trades here at the station, but I think we come to you when there's any audio issues. So how did you get involved with bands and sound design?
Well, I started out in high school as a musician. I played string bass, electric bass, and tuba, and played in bands. And when you play in a band, you have to know a little bit about how the equipment is hooked together. And in my mid-20s, two things. I hurt my hand, but also I was always playing in bands everybody was a lot better than me. And it came to the point where the only bands that wanted me were bands I didn't want to play in. So I decided to go into sound instead.
So, and is that a pretty common transition to make? So, sort of failed musicians become sound designers?
Yes, that's actually amazingly how much that happens. And even musicians that are good players, some of them will just do sound out of necessity.
So around this time, so your early 20s, and what was your first kind of break-in gig for being in charge of the sound?
Well, the band that I actually played bass in before I hurt my hand, uh, they were looking for someone to take over doing their sound. And, back in those days, I always had a truck, so I was the obvious choice for the sound guy. And I can remember that I kind of longed for like a better mixer, so I spent my money on gear that ended up making their sound better. But that's kind of how it started.
So for even us that are, here at the station all the time, we do the video side of it. We like to just kind of forget a lot of time about the sound side. And for a band especially, there's so much going on, right? Because there's a mix for the band, there's what you're recording, there's the PA side of it, so for what the audience hears. So is this all something that you did all those things?
Yes, all those things. I've worked live sound for individual bands. I worked as the house mixer for clubs, and I interned at a recording studio in Menlo Park for about a year.
So at a recording studio, it's much different process than a live event, isn't it?
Yeah, because you can do overdubs and you can redo little parts of it, and actually just about the time I was starting to get into it, they were much more working with editing the sound, which means they made it through this part of the song really well. We'll just copy it over and over again and use that for the whole song. And that wasn't until probably about 75, 76 that became really common.
And so in that case, when you do the live events and compared to the studio, I've always been kind of a fan of even records that come out and they're like the live versions.
Yeah, and it's really hard to get the same feel of playing in front of a crowd in a recording studio. And when I do my show, I have the same problem. Some bands just can't get over the fact that there's no reaction at the end of the song. There's just three cameras looking at them, and they're used to performing for audiences.
So you produce a show here. It's called My Tune Television, and you've been producing with a co-producer for a number of years.
Yeah, this is, I think, our 8th or ninth season with this.
And so when you have a band in studio, are you shooting for make it sound like a studio performance, or is it supposed to be more like a live event?
I'm shooting for live, because something, if we did a bunch of overdubs and did a bunch of canning to it, it would not sound real, to me at least. It would sound like, hey, they're lip syncing to their CD. I want it to sound and feel real.
There is sort of an element to live performance, right? It feels a
Absolutely.
little more exciting, a little more energized.
Absolutely. In fact, one of the bands that I had on, in fact, there's a clip here from them. Uh, after the show, they asked me for the tracks because they were having trouble getting the feel right for that song in the studio. So they actually ended up using the tracks that were recorded here in their CD.
Okay, so just because they come in and do a show here doesn't mean that their audio is done necessarily. Do you do a lot of like post-production
Yes,
work on this?
I do post production. I bring in well, actually now it's a 32 track digital recorder, and I record the individual tracks plus a stereo mix. And I try to get as good a stereo mix, live mix as I can, and that will go to videotape. And then I do post production where I remix all the tracks and then lay it back onto the video. And you know, there's been times where the live mix was actually good enough, and I've used that. But most of the time, I want to take it that next level to make it, you know, really good.
And so I imagine that all the effort you put into making it sound just right is paramount for getting good bands on the show.
Yes, there's no better advertising for the show than a band that did a great job and sounds really good.
So who are some of your favorite bands? What genres of music have you had on?
Well, I've done everything from bluegrass to metal. I haven't had any reggae and I haven't had any rap. I've kind of talked to a couple rap bands, but there are no rap performers that don't have some profanity in their lyrics. And I know it technically you can do it, but for me personally, I don't want to do it.
I see. So most of the time, or all the time, I guess, there's always live instruments.
Yes, live instruments, everything is recorded live. We don't do any over. Usually, I take it back. We've had equipment failures and we've had to, you know, re-record a guitar line, but most of the time over the, you know, I think 100 or more shows we've done, it's all been what was recorded here ends up in the mix.
So this may sound like a silly question to you, but you said you've had everything from metal to bluegrass. Is that a lot different, the process of miking these sort of bands?
Yes, yes, it can be very, very different. Like bluegrass, they're used to standing around a single microphone, and they kind of make their own mix.
Huh.
And it's started now where they're using more microphones, but there's no direct boxes, and so you're kind of dependent on how the room sounds too. So that's very different than with a metal band where the amplifiers are very close mic'd so that you don't get bleed from other things into each mic, and the only thing that you have problem with is trying to get a clean vocal.
So in that case, a bluegrass band can kind of set up anywhere and people will be around them in the audience and it'll sound kind of right. But a metal band kind of needs an audio person as a filter to
Yep.
get the mix right. You can't just set up in the park as a metal band and expect the people around to hear it the right way.
Yeah, and here's the thing with metal bands. The guitar players play so loud to get their sound that, like, when I have them in here, it's the camera people can't hear anything, and we're just lucky if we get something that works, because that's why I don't have it too often. It's a little hard to deal with the but you know, my favorite is guys that are doing original music that sounds like classic rock, because that's where I'm from, kind of.
Right. So who were, when growing up, and you're a music lover, what did you listen to growing up?
Well, you know, really early on, it was, you know, Clapton and you know, I loved Cream, and I loved the Doors and the Beatles, of course, and the Rolling Stones. And then later on, like when I was towards the end of my high school career, I listened to Tower of Power, Chicago, a lot of that sort of stuff, and I still kind of listen to that stuff
And
too.
you've always been partial to bands with horn sections, it seems like. So
Yes.
that seems like it would be something that's very hard to capture, which is horns, because especially say a trumpet, it's coming through so loud on top of everything else. How do you mic a trumpet in a rock band?
Well, it's really hard because they have trouble hearing. So
Is that right?
yeah, they have trouble hearing it because the horn's blowing that way. So you need to put a monitor in front of them so they can hear themselves. And now you have to deal with the monitor sound is also hitting the microphone. So it has this kind of delayed sound to it. I work with a rock band a lot, and we use a kind of an old-fashioned analog fix for that. It's a, a clear plastic ring with a hole in the middle, and we put the microphone through it. So when the horn player plays into it, that plastic ring projects the sound back to him. And it, because it's hitting the back directly off axis on the mic, it's rejected by the mic, and that's the best way to get a clean sound.
So we do have a clip, a couple clips actually from your show, My Tune Television. So I'd like to take a look at the first one. This is going to be Hickory Wind, one of the more popular
Yes.
ones. So let's take a look at that and maybe we'll talk about it.
South Carolina, there are many tall pines, and I remember the oak tree we used to climb. But whenever I'm lonesome, I'd always pretend that I'm getting the feel of the hickory wind. I started out younger, most everything, for all riches and pleasure, what else could life bring? But it makes me feel better each time it begins, calling me home to the hickory wind. It's a hard thing to find out. Trouble is real in a faraway city, faraway field. But it makes me feel better each time it begins, calling me home to the hickory wind.
So what a awesome performance that was. Tell us a little bit about that band.
Well, the name of the band is the Tuttles and A.J. Lee, and they're local. Uh, the bass player is the dad, and he teaches at Griffin Music, which is kind of a nationally known place for vintage guitars and for teaching. Uh, how I got that band is Molly. He actually emailed me when I was looking for solo acts,
And
and
Molly
he
was the singer.
she was the guitar player that sang backup. And he said, my daughter Molly has some original songs. Would you like to have her on? And she came in. Uh, it was about a year earlier than that. She was 16 or 17, and she just stole the night. So at the end of the night, I was talking to her mother, and she told me about the band, and I said, "Man, I need to have the band
Right.
on too." So it was pretty good.
And this was one of the more well-received programs that you did. You won some regional and national awards, and also you have quite a viewership on the internet for this
Yeah,
particular
this
performance.
this particular performance has over 300,000 views, which is uh, on my YouTube page. It literally has half the views. So I've got like 690, and it's got 310 or something.
I was reminded looking at, I used to also produce a music show for fun. I'm also a musician who's not very good. Probably you're better than me. I've actually played guitar on your show back when it was something else, before you
Yeah.
had real musicians on. Uh, for me, it was always a really exciting way to collaborate in a very creative way with these bands. I mean, the visuals go along with it, and you have control over the lighting. You must get something out of that, almost like you're part
Oh
of the
yeah,
band.
yeah. And the video side has become more important, uh, you know, to me. But really, someone early on, when I was first producing some videos on my own, the guy that I was working for told me, he says, if your audio is bad, you got nothing. But if your video is bad and your audio is good, you at least got a radio show.
That's right. You could like draw cartoons over it.
Yeah, that's true.
That's true. So, what about the technology? So you have to be sort of a mic nerd, right,
Yeah,
to
a
do
little
it
bit.
properly. So how has that changed from 1975 to now?
Well, I tell you, the biggest change is that we went from recording on tape, which has a lot of limitations. A lot of people like it better because it does have a certain warmth to it. But with digital recording, it's brought down the cost of the recorders. It's brought down the some of the limitations on noise and stuff like that. And it's really kind of opened up the whole recording industry. It used to be, if you wanted to record a demo, you had to go to a recording studio, 24 track recorder, $115 an hour. Now, for $300 you buy an interface and you plug it into your computer and you record an album.
So is there any drawback from that? You hear people that swear by analog or vinyl or the big tapes.
Yes, and the purist will always long for the older stuff. But for me, if I was trying to record albums, I would think about using some analog. It's really common to record, even if you're recording digitally, to record the drums with analog, because there's a little softness to the distortion that it gets that a lot of people love. But for something like this, we're trying to make something that showcases the band. We need to be able to do it within a reasonable with a reasonable price, and that's the most important thing.
Right. So, and in this case, of course, there's no price. They come in and you kind of do it just for fun. It's the community television side of
Yeah,
it.
I spend my own money to buy the equipment, and I'm constantly updating equipment, and but for me, it's kind of a labor of love. Our original idea when we started the show was, first, we weren't going to let our taste in music dictate who we had on. If someone wanted to be on the show and they could make it through a song
Without cussing.
without cussing and at least, not sound like a train wreck the whole way through, they could be on.
Now, from what I understand, occasionally you do get bands that come in and they sound like a train wreck the whole way through. What do you do with that kind of footage?
I've had a couple of bands that had happened with. One, it was okay. I would have aired it, but the artist really begged me not to, and so I didn't air it. And the other one, they were very unhappy and wanted, because of their performance. And I told them I could fix it, and I spent a little bit of time, and they let me air the show.
You can't really post-produce a good performance, can you?
Can't, not really.
That's the other excitement of live music. So we do have another clip that we want to show. This one is the more electrified version from a band called Honey Wilders, and this is also after we made the switch to HD, so it'll look a little nicer. So let's take a look at that.
just another lost angel with a phone. Geneva's Avenue, she's falling in between the stars and sunsets on the scene. And she said she's gonna be a big star someday, but I think we like her anyway. Geneva's Avenue, she's lost the magic key to a time and place in history. Geneva's Avenue, she's working for the dream. The knights and kings down on their knees. And she said she's gonna be a big star someday, but I think we like her anyway. So come on, Geneva, it's time for you to go. And come on, Geneva, why won't you pick up the phone?
So what could you tell us about those guys? Obviously much different from the first clip. They were rocking out somewhat.
Yeah, kind of an interesting band. Actually, how I got this band is the bass player from this band saw the previous clip and had the lead guitar player contact me to be on the show. It's so, and they were a lot of fun. They actually performed. You know, they performed for the cameras like they were in a big concert hall, which really makes it easier for the people to shoot the videos.
Yeah, and the more savvy bands will kind of know this, right? That okay, I don't need to fill up a concert hall. I'm just playing to the mic that's literally this far from
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, about half the bands I have on say at the end of the performance, they say, "When can we come back? We know what we want to do now."
That always cracked me up too, because they always, once it's, you know, the best performance by any band has happened in the garage with no one else to see it, and they always say, "Oh, we could have played so much better," but it's only because it's sort of been documented, right? So
Yeah.
how valuable is that to bands, though, to see them, you know, not only hear themselves played back, but to see their own performance? That must be very valuable.
I think it's of great value to most bands, and you can see changes in some bands' performance after they see the videos, and one of the best features for them is that when they want to get a job, they can just steer the person that's going to hire them to the videos, and you know, they have a demo tape. In fact, I had a jazz band and usually jazz bands do, you know, long songs. In a half hour, they did 9 2.5-minute songs, so that I asked him, "Why'd you cut them all short?" And he says, "Hey, this is the best demo tape I'll ever get."
So, you know, we're coming up on the end of the show. I wanted to talk a little bit about your influences and mentors, you know, growing up. So, in high school, there was someone that was important to you over at Menlo Atherton High School.
My high school band director, he actually started there my sophomore year in 1971. Yeah, but he had taught at another high school in 70, and he ended up being there for 40 years. But he was kind of the one that kept me rehearsing and kind of driving me. And I played in jazz band, marching band, concert band.
This was bass?
I played bass, except marching band, I played tuba.
Tuba and bass. Those
Yeah.
fit together.
Bass clef was my, you know, why learn to read at treble clef when you only need the bass clef? But he really was a big influence on not just me, but after 40 years of teaching at Menlo Atherton, his son, who's now a band director at Oak Grove High School, got a band together from every decade that he taught. So he had 4 big band jazz bands that played at his retirement party.
And you didn't play, you were the one that...
I videotaped it and recorded the audio. Herb Wong was the MC. He's a big Bay Area jazz guy that just recently passed away. He was a DJ on K-Jazz, and it was quite a big deal.
And so, do you get a chance to? So, and I know that was very special that you were part of that 40 years. And he's retired now, though.
Yes, he's retired, and I see him every once in a while too.
Do you ever get a chance to, make music anymore?
Playing, not really. My hand will not let me play for more than about 10 minutes at a time. I have arthritis in my thumbs.
And so, what's next for you as on the other side of it? So, you're producing the show. You're going to continue to do that. What are some, any big bands you'd like to get in?
I'm always looking for the next best band. At some point, I would like to, because when I interned at the recording studio, I have a couple of album credits from working there, and I would like to produce an album someday. And with the equipment I have, I can probably produce a decent little album.
And then, if you had your druthers, what sort of genre would you do?
It would probably be a horn band. I like horn bands. And,
Just all horns?
Yeah. No, a Tower Power style, funk band. And, I still am in touch with a lot of the musicians that I played with in high school. I mean, it's like, most people still know the guys they went to college with. We all know the guys that we went to high school with because most of the guys didn't go into music in college. They just did it in high school, and that was the end of it.
And stayed close because of the music they were making together.
Yes,
Well,
and still make together.
Tim, we're just about out of time, so thank you so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And I'll see you every day this week. So thanks so much for joining us. Bye, everybody.